Now for a few housekeeping details about tonight's event. Please be aware that the League of Women Voters never supports or opposes candidates for office or political parties. Any use of the League name or footage from tonight's debate in campaign materials, literature, or advertising of any kind, including internet, cable, or television, has not been authorized by the League of Women Voters. HPTV 15 will be taping the proceedings for rebroadcast in its entirety on public access channels 15 for Cablevision Optimum customers and channel 44 for Verizon Fios customers. As a courtesy to the candidates, please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices now, and please refrain from taking photographs during the debate. There are 2 League volunteers collecting your questions. Please raise your hands when you have written them. Please note the topic of your question at the top of the card. Please submit Borough Council questions now, so raise your hands if you've got some collection. Questions for mayoral candidates will be collected during the brief break after the Borough Council candidate forum. Restrooms are out this door and to the right. At this time, I would like to introduce our moderator for this debate, Ms. Dawn Clark. Per our League practice, Ms. Clark is not from this voting district. She is a League-trained moderator and a member of the Union Area League of Women Voters. Ms. Clark will introduce the candidates and outline the format for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So, because we have the candidates, I think, where's okay. I'd like to introduce the candidates first. They're not seated as yet, so I think I'm going to start with way down on the left here, and we have Mr. Austin Mayoral. Would you please to introduce Mr. Phil George. Then Mr. Matt Hale. And as you know, these are 3 gentlemen that are candidates for the 2 positions as the Democratic candidate for your borough council. Now, I would like to say that's the last time we're going to do that applause, okay? So we're going to go over the format now and a bit of more of the rules of the road. This evening's format is that the candidates are all going to have an opportunity for a 2-minute opening statement, and for which they have just randomly drawn their speaking position on that. After that, we are going to have them answer 2 prepared questions that they've received in advance. They will have 2 minutes to answer those questions. Thereafter, we are going to have 1.5 minutes each of the candidates to answer the questions that you present. Now, this is a forum devoted just to hear the views of the candidates for your borough council.
We can't hear you in the back.
Is that better? Yes. This is a forum to hear the views of just your borough council candidates. Therefore, your questions have to concern those issues that come before the borough council. So I don't want to hear anything about offshore drilling rights or even the Board of Ed, because they're not appropriate for these candidates. And to ensure that things go smoothly, I want to also say that all of the audience questions, as well as the candidates' remarks, must follow the lead policy of being concerned with issues only, not personalities. I will not allow any abusive, personalized, or irrelevant questions to be asked. And no remarks can be personalized either. No name calling. So that we can move along in the time allotted and hear equally from each of the candidates, we ask that you hold your applause until the end of the forum, and that's important. Your questions should be on the cards provided, and write the question and to whom it is directed. You can direct it to a particular candidate, but all of the candidates will have an opportunity to respond. Now, I'm old, I have old eyes, and that means you're going to have to write legibly, please, because it's hard for me to read sometimes, okay? We will have the questions, and after the candidates answer the questions, there will be no discussion from the floor. So you're going to have to be brave and keep your mouth shut. No jumping around. Okay, do we think we're ready to go here then? All right, then I would like to call upon for the opening statements, and for the timekeepers, remember that it is 2 minutes for the opening statement. And the first one, we don't want to do that because there's holes in the side. Yeah, there's 2 little holes on the side, and when I move, it goes off. The first speaker for an opening statement is Phil George. Mr. George.
Thank you. Good evening, Highland Park. Thank you for braving the weather. My name's Phil George. I'm council president, and I'm running for council because I love this town. We chose this town over 20 years ago because interracial marriages weren't very popular in South Jersey at the time. But I was familiar from living here all through the 70s, and I said, Highland Park is a good place for us. So we moved here, we settled in, and we've been participating in the town for all those 20 years. In its diversity, in its differences, in its character. It has some of its problems. So long about 6 years ago, I said, I'd really like to use my skills. I'm an attorney that practices specifically in the area of government law, representing towns and planning boards and redevelopment agencies. And I said, I'd like to volunteer those talents and skills that I have for my town. So I went through a rather difficult interview with the committee and was selected to fill the vacancy that the mayor left when she became mayor. And I was excited to bring in all those skills. And so here I am today, and I'm the liaison to the sewers and the potholes and the trash and the recycling and more potholes and the Meadows Trail and the solar field, and absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with my skill set. But that's the greater fun and pleasure and challenge. I love this town, I love being here, and I'm seeking your vote.
Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Austin Mayoral.
Thank you to the league for having us tonight, and to everybody who is participating. My name is Austin Mayoral, and I've lived in Highland Park for 10 years. I have 2 jobs here. I work for 2 nonprofits. One is Who Is My Neighbor Incorporated, where I run the Cave After School Center for middle schoolers. And the other is with Neighbor Corps Reentry Services, where I work with folks who have been recently released from jail, helping them transition back into the community. So during the day, I work with people who can be demanding, sometimes confrontational, and those are just the middle schoolers. But seriously, my work involves me having to work within a budget, assist with grant proposals, and have difficult conversations about challenging issues. and I'm running for Borough Council because I'd like to help make the Highland Park government more inclusive, more transparent, and more responsive to the needs of the town's communities. And I'll be honest, I'm not the person up here who's lived in Highland Park the longest. And I don't have endorsements from politicians. But what I do have is endorsements from residents of this town. People who know me, know the work I do, and know what I care about. And I don't have a background in political science, but I do have a background as a resident of Volker Street who worries about my kids when they walk out the door because cars fly around the sharp curve in front of my house. I have a background as a resident who cares about the library and a patron of the library and who would like to have the roof that doesn't leak. And I have a background as a member of different communities in town, as a renter and as a proud member of the LGBTQ community. I won't have all the answers for you tonight, but I also have a proven record of following up on people's comments and following them up with action. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say and learning about the issues that matter to you tonight and being able to respond to them with action in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Matt Hale.
Hello, my name is Matt Hale. I'm currently a council member. I was elected in November of 2018 to fill the remainder of the term from Matt Hirsch. We sort of have a joke that there needs to be a Matt H on council, and so I filled that role. I'm here tonight to ask for your vote. I'm also here tonight to tell you a little bit about why I got into politics, why I got into this council seat, a little bit about what we've done, and a little bit about what we hope to do in the future. I don't know if you remember a while back, President Trump said that the press were the enemy of the people. And after he said that, Chris Christie, who was governor at the time, said was asked the same question. Do you think that the press are the enemy of the people? And his answer was no. I don't think the press are the enemy of the people. But I'll tell you who is. The academic political scientists, people like Matt Hale, who sit in their academic towers and criticize me, never having done anything in his entire life. And like most things that came out of Chris Christie's mouth, he was wrong. I had actually been a district director for California Senator Barbara Boxer. I worked for numerous other politicians at the state, local, and national level. But he did have one point. It had been a while since I was actually actively engaged in government. And it created this idea that I needed to step up. I needed to have an opportunity to be a part of my community and try and make some changes in my community. And so I did. I think that gave the spark. But the fundamental reason why I'm here is my wife Carrie and I live over on North 4th Avenue with my little guy David, and a daughter who's 16, Eva, and a son who's 14. They grew up in Highland Park. It's a fantastic place to grow up. It's a fantastic place to raise your kids.
Mr. Hale.
And that's why I'm here.
All right. It's hard sometimes to keep it in your timelines. Okay, we're going to move now to the prepared question portion. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Hale, for first responding to the question. And the question is, what are the critical issues that you see facing the community now, and how would you prioritize them? 2 minutes.
So we have a number of issues in Highland Park, but in terms of prioritizing, my priorities are taxes, taxes, and taxes. I think that one of the most fundamental things that we need to do as a borough council, one of the most fundamental things we need to do in borough government is figure out ways of stabilizing our taxes. Taxes in Highland Park are high. There's no doubt about that. Taxes in Highland Park, we need to figure out how to keep them as low as possible. I have to be honest, I would love if the state of New Jersey passed a millionaire's tax. I would love if the state of New Jersey legalized adult use cannabis as a tax revenue source. I would love if the state of New Jersey figured out a school funding formula that gave our schools all of the money that they need. But in all honesty, I don't see many of those things actually happening. I think that we can't continue to say, if the state would only give us this, if the state would only give us that. we would have all of our answers solved. I think that figuring out tax stabilization has to start at home. It has to start with us in Highland Park, and we have to own up to the fact that in order for taxes to be stabilized, we have to do a wide attempt and search for Raritan Avenue development. We have to make sure that this is a town that is ready for development and ready for smart growth and smart development. A lot of that stems from, we have some opportunities. We have a master plan that is coming up that will help guide our growth. We have some innovative methods for attracting new development and new businesses that we've already started in Highland Park. Those are the types of smart growth that we need on the Raritan Avenue that will bring in rateables to the town so that we can stabilize our taxes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayoral, your critical issues and how you prioritize them.
The first critical issue is the stabilization of our high property taxes. To make living affordable, it's definitely a priority. I would work with the mayor and the council members to ensure fiscal responsibility and make sure that the big developers pay their fair share of taxes. And downtown redevelopment is critical to this issue. I love living in a town where I can walk to the main street, but I wish there were more businesses to walk to. And those businesses should reflect the diverse communities of the town, as well as bring in residents from other towns and make Highland Park a destination. I also see a critical issue is improving the quality of the roads. The state gives towns like Highland Park and other towns our size grant money that can be used to do more than just repave and repatch over and over again. We could look at installing speed bumps on the south side and not just have them on the north side. We could make our streets safer by looking at techniques to slow traffic, to better light intersections, and to create more space for cyclists and pedestrians. All this would foster a more walkable and bikeable town, which would be more attractive to businesses. Also, I believe the priority of the town needs to be affordable, easy to access recreation. My daughters and the kids in the cave talk about hanging out at Rite Aid, the turf, and the rooftop of an apartment complex here in town. How about we give them little pocket parks throughout town to hang out at? One could be a fountain that kids can splash in. One could be a half-court basketball court. But make it easy for the kids to access so they don't go to Rite Aid or the turf every day and they have alternatives. All these things are very important, of course, critical issues. But I truly believe that no matter what efforts are made on these issues, that if the government does not address the issues of inclusion, transparency, and equity, then it'll be for naught. With these values as our guide, we can tackle the challenges and make Highland Park an even better place to live, work, and play.
Thank you. And now, Mr. George.
Thank you.
Critical issues.
I agree with everything that Austin and Matt say, but we need to talk about priorities. The biggest priority that I see, and you may not agree with me, is our infrastructure. If you read the history of Highland Park, the sewers and the water went in over 100 years ago. And if you drive down Raritan at night sometimes, you'll see the repair trucks fixing water mains. I had my experience looking down into the sewers and groveling around when my lateral overflowed and realized that right outside my door is a 100-year-old manhole. Number one is infrastructure. The problem with it is prioritizing. It is a long process, a hard process, and a thoughtful process that we all need to be engaged in, and we need to start now. The other priority that I have is social justice. When Jackson started middle school, my Jackson, he ran into an incident with a Caucasian bully, and it resulted in a fight. Jackson got 3-day suspension, and the Caucasian got none. When my wife, one of the first 2 African-American women to run for office here in Highland Park, was canvassing and knocking on doors on the north side, she was spit on. So I understand those issues. My family has suffered those issues. And yet, Highland Park has the best promise and the best ability to change and the best quality of life that I know. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mayoral, on the next prepared question, and that is, how might you involve the community in helping the mayor and the borough council make good decisions that earn wide public support?
One thing I would like to do is to hold town halls in venues such as this. They'd be divided into two parts. The first part would be time for public comment, for residents to address the elected officials on issues and concerns that they have. And then the second part of the town hall would be time to break out into small sessions with residents, elected officials, town volunteers together to talk about issues that are important to the residents. And these town halls would need to be held regularly, maybe quarterly, not just holding a town hall as damage control in response to a crisis or a controversy. I also would like to implement volunteer fairs, where current volunteer members of the government come and talk about their volunteer experiences and answer questions that are asked of them. I think at this volunteer fairs, you could also have neighbors recommending other neighbors who they know have certain expertise in certain areas to be reached out to. And then we work with those experts to address certain issues. And one area that an expert could help us with is the town website, making it easier to navigate, making it easier for residents to access information about volunteer opportunities, and making it easier for residents to report issues, big and small, to the town government and have an action be taken. I also think that we need to talk to the experts that are here in town, and we have experts around every corner, but we need to get input from them at the beginning of projects, as opposed to receiving feedback as the project is winding up. It's much easier to respond to people's needs and ideas at the beginning than it is to just respond to criticism at the very end of a project.
Thank you. Mr. George, how might you involve the community in helping the mayor and the borough council make good decisions?
I like the methodology that we have now. Did you know that we have over 240 volunteers engaged in all of our boards and commissions? Our volunteers, I see many of you here tonight, they volunteer from everything from tending our gardens to serving on the planning board and the zoning board. And that information that comes, and they're volunteers and they're residents. Some of them have expertise in this or that. They're architects, they're planners, they're engineers, they're gardeners, they're academics. That is the best source that I find for information. That is the best source that I find what people are thinking, what are they concerned, and how are they looking at the mechanics of how we're governing. I think that's the best communication that we can possibly do. In addition to that, I find that just talking to people on the street, some of you know my joke of the aisle 7 discussion. We spend a lot of time, by the time we wind around Stop and Shop, we're at aisle 7. And a lot of discussions there take place about the plastic bag ordinance, the maintenance of the streets, our new contract with the computer firm that's showing us how to do deferred maintenance on our roadway so our grant money stretches farther. It is the volunteers and the residents that share this communication. And you can talk about social media, and you can talk about the website, which we're in the process of redesigning. You can talk about the town halls, and this administration has held more in the last 2 years than occurred in the last 20 years. But it's the feedback from the volunteers and the people that they talk to that is the most curative, corrective, and deliberate advice that we follow.
Thank you. And now I'd like to hear from Mr. Hale on what are your thoughts.
So thank you very much. And I just want to make one small question about the way the question is worded in here. The idea is that wide public support may not often be the best decision. And I know that's not necessarily a popular thing to say. We want to make sure that we have as much public input as we possibly can, but at the end of the day, The people who are elected to these positions are people who use our best judgment to make the best decisions that we can. We can't always be chasing exactly what's popular, we have to be chasing what is right. And there's a couple things ways that we've done that, and a couple things that I want to highlight. We certainly have town halls. We certainly have a number of public meetings in town halls. The way that we structured them, particularly the way we structured them around the hiring of the new police chief, is that we had a public comment period where people could talk and vent and say what they felt needed to be said. But then we broke into working groups of volunteers to come up with specific topics and questions that we were going to ask in the police interview process. Those were focus groups. Those were little tiny groups of people, 10, 12, that focused exactly on what we think we need to ask the police chief. That's sort of the active way of bringing the public into the decision-making process and making sure that the public is actively involved in that decision-making process. Another thing to highlight, another example of this is the Immigration and Refugee Committee recently wrote with the police department a standard operating procedure for how the police department interacts with the Immigrant and Refugee Committee. And it was a collaborative effort between the two of them. That's the type of process where it's the borough, the people working in the borough, and the residents who are working together to solve problems. That's the way that we get trust with people, that's the way that we get good decisions made, and that's the way we get things done.
Thank you. Could I please have some questions from the floor? Now, I need the people who are collecting the questions to please come up and give them to me.
If anybody needs a card, please raise your hand.
I need to ask the questions, though. So. Okay, I'm going to start with you, Mr. George, and this first question is, what is the local road repair plan? Given budget restrictions, what can we expect for planned repairs? Time frame and the areas to be designated. Can we start with that?
Thank you. We made some new plans over the last 2 years, and we tried something completely different. There was a company that we found that has designed computer programming along with training for our DPW that assesses roads. We used to just put them on a list, and everybody knows, is my street on the list? When's my street coming up? This company shows us how to look at the roadways and determine, is there preventative maintenance that we can get another 2, 3, 4 years out of this by tarring or patching, and which roads actually need more work and which are going to go in the next couple of years. The second thing we did is get increased grants from DOT. The road repair program is normally, because of the way asphalt is produced and because of the weather, the paving usually starts in July and runs through the end of September. And this year, I believe that we're going to be doing significantly more repairs than we've done before.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hale, what is the plan for local repairs and what's the time frame? Who gets designated?
So one of the things that is, I think, important about council is that we recognize that there are expertise within council on how we go about solving problems. And Phil is the expert on road repair. Phil is the expert on sewers. Phil is the expert on garbage. Phil is the expert on a wide variety of fairly yucky things. And so Phil's... So the plan that Phil talked about and the aggressive use of going after to get grant funding for additional repairs is something that both the mayor and Phil have, I think, been quite successful at, and to increase the number of potholes that can get done at a particular time.
Mr. Mayoral, your thoughts on road repair planning?
The specific question was about the time frame, I believe. And obviously, I'm not currently on the council, so I can't speak to that time frame. But as I mentioned, road repair is a critical issue. We can't just keep repairing and repairing the same holes and streets over and over again and expect there to be a change. I think the council really needs to take a hard look at different applications and techniques that can be applied to road repair, and really take a look to see if the way that's been done in the past is the best way to move forward.
Okay. Then let's move on to another question, and I'm going to start with you, Mr. Hale. Okay. What issues do you believe to be most pressing regarding housing supply, affordable housing, and redevelopment in our borough? How would you address those?
Thank you very much.
In 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a lot. Okay, so one of the fundamental things that this administration has done that I think we can be quite proud of, we've made affordable housing a priority. We've made affordable housing a priority in all of the new developments that have gone forward. And we are in the process of more than living up to our current obligations and our future obligations for affordable housing. I think that one of the most pressing things that we have to make sure of is that we want to make sure that affordable housing is not in a particular area or a particular neighborhood. We want to make sure that affordable housing is across Highland Park, so that our community is more cohesive. I think there's a couple things that we might be able to do in terms of integrating, connecting different roadways so that different parts of town are better connected. And I think that's a fundamental thing that we ought to be working on. I also think that we need to do, as we have done, structures like a pilot, which is an attempt to bring developers in so that they will bring affordable housing with them for more people, but also have the type of housing and the type of communities that we want. And I think all of this can be tied together in a community master plan, which is something that is coming, something that is important for everyone to be involved in, and I hope that you all will.
Mr. Mayoral, affordable housing and redevelopment?
When it comes to affordable housing, obviously this is an issue of equity, and it also taps into the history of Highland Park. And as Mr. Hale mentioned, we need to spread the affordable housing throughout town. We can't have the bulk of the affordable housing continue to be put where it's historically always been put, on the south side, on South 7th and South 6th. We need to spread the affordable housing around to help make the town as diverse as we would like to be. And as far as housing in general goes, one thing I would like to see more of is more mixed-use development in downtown on the main street, with retail on the bottom floor, office space on the second floor, and then housing on the third and fourth floor, some of that being obviously affordable housing.
Thank you. Now, Mr. George.
Thank you. So here's what we did. A couple of years ago, there was a house up for foreclosure that had been abandoned in the South 8th, South 9th area. The borough got the house. The borough partnered with Habitat for Humanity, and we rebuilt the house. We relocated a family whose home had been wiped out by Hurricane Sandy, and one of the first Habitat for Humanity zero-interest mortgage loans. That led us to another program. We adopted the vacant properties ordinance so that all of the houses, and there's a number of them, in Highland Park, scattered around the neighborhoods, that have been abandoned because they're in foreclosure, we're charging them for the vacancy because the maintenance and the safety devolves on us. But it also allows us to obtain the houses at a low rate and foreclosure and continue that process. Plain old house, plain old neighborhood, no special set-asides. All those projects are going forward. And the other thing that I support is re-examining the redevelopment formula about mixed use, because we don't need commercial space everywhere. We have a development approved by the redevelopment agency going up North 2nd that actually has ground floor ADA accessible housing. And that's a new formula that's going around that I like.
Thank you. I'm going to move on then to the next question, and I'm going to ask you to start, Mr. Mayoral. It's on transparency. Specifically, what will you do to facilitate greater awareness of upcoming issues and involvement in decision-making processes?
I think we touched on some of that in the public support question, but as far as creating greater awareness, I think we need to look at reaching out to the communities that we're trying to reach. We can't expect everyone to be dependent on going to the website or going to Facebook, but we need to really look at going to where the people are and creating energy and excitement and creating relevancy to the communities we're talking to and give them a reason to want to get involved. Also along the lines of transparency, Monique Coleman, who's running for mayor, and I would make sure that all the meetings that are being held are as open to the public as possible. If a meeting is a public meeting, we would have it in a space that's designed to hold the public, so that people, if they want to come and hear about issues, there's room for them to come and they feel welcome there.
Okay, Mr. George, transparency.
The first step in transparency is for every person filling this room to come to every council meeting and hear what's going on. The second thing about transparency is something that we started in particular a couple of years ago when ordinances of some significance, not the ordinary bond ordinance for the road or something, but we took the plastic bag ordinance. Initially I opposed it, but I'm liaison to the groups that wanted it. So we started discussions at public meetings of Sustainable Highland Park and the Environmental Commission. We then moved to, once we had those ideas and that input, we designed the ordinance a year before it was introduced. And we ran a survey and said, what do you think about this? Do you want to do it? After that, we brought the ordinance into the administration and said, get this on the website, get it out on Facebook. We started looking at it. Still hadn't been introduced yet. So we took a look at that. Then we ran a survey afterward. What do you think about the ordinance? What do you think about the plan? We've been doing this with a lot of other ordinances that of significance. It's a new plan. I'm glad to have been involved in the pilot of it, and we're going to continue that.
Mr. Hale, transparency.
So I think there's a number of things that we can build on, a number of different things that we've started that we can build on. And I'll name a couple of them. We currently are in the process of redoing our website. Right now the website is from a company called Civic Plus that is about providing information. We are moving to a new company and a new development where it's about communication. The idea that the website is not just providing information, it's about having communication with people. And there's a number of different ways that we can do that through a lot of different multiple platforms. As Phil said, we've had a growth in the number of public meetings. I think we should continue the growth in public meetings, but continue them as working meetings. A public meeting and transparency is helped when you have people working together from the community. I've mentioned a couple of the things that we've done in terms of transparency and openness with the Highland Park Equity Commission, with the Immigration and Refugee Commission. All of those are commissions that have started under Mayor Gale's administration, and all of those are about making sure that everything that is going on in the borough is open to the public, that the public knows everything that they possibly can know, short of what they legally can't. And that's the guiding principle that we've had, that's the guiding principle that we followed, and it's a guiding principle that will continue.
Thank you. Mr. George, what policies might you implement to enhance the relationship between the police and the diverse population within Highland Park? In 1.5 minutes.
I think I would encourage, participate in, and perhaps enhance the present program that started when we appointed our new Chief Abrams. I recognize that public input at meetings with the officers and so on was rather catch-can. At times we did have a great public schools officer, and now Captain Corbello, but the new administration in working with us is really planning on much more involvement through meetings, through informal meetings with the officers, through regular presentations. And the Public Safety Committee is also planning on working with them, and the mentor who has been selected to train up this new cadre in community involvement and in community spirit. I think we need to wait and see how they listen to us when we tell them, this is what the community wants, this is what needs to be done, and this is the only thing that we will accept.
Mr. Hale, can you enlarge on that?
Sure. There's a number of things that we're going to build on again, and a number of things that we've done already. And I'll start with the Highland Park Equity Commission. Just a few things that the Equity Commission, which we started, has done. They were responsible and in the room when we were hiring the police mentor. The mentor, she's an experienced chief, Chief Spruill, who will be guiding the new chief and the new captain as they start their job. And it was a citizen commission, the Highland Park Equity Commission, that was involved in the interview process and helped us choose the police mentor. I mentioned the Immigration and Refugee Committee, the way that it has worked on standard operating procedures, which is the guidelines by which the police department follow, were written in part by community members. That to me is a fundamental way of increasing the level of trust and transparency. Another way that we have done this is we've been honest. We've been very, very clear and open and honest about the issues in the Highland Park Police Department. We'll mention quickly the use of force document, which many of people have looked at from the Star Ledger report. I, in particular, but in general, the public safety dove into those numbers to find specific places where the Highland Park Police Department needed to improve. And we reported those numbers very specifically and very publicly to say there's clear need for improvement in our police department. And we are working on strategies to make that happen.
Thank you. Mr. Mayoral, what policies might you implement to enhance the relationship between the police and the diverse population within Highland Park?
I think obviously the first issue is obviously for leadership to acknowledge, as you were saying, that there is a problem, but also to take that another step and offer implicit bias training to members of the town, residents who live here in town, who don't believe there is a problem. In addition to implicit bias training with the police force, I also think there needs to be diversity training specific to other communities, such as the LGBTQ community. I also believe that we need to implement a system so someone feels comfortable making a complaint without fear of retribution, or they feel comfortable making a statement about an incident they feel was of an implicit bias without somebody coming back and saying something to them. And lastly, we have the Equity Commission. Let's truly use it. It is my understanding, based upon statements that were made in a town council meeting, that the town government did not listen to the recommendation when it came to hiring the acting police chief and acting police captain. It was stated in a town council meeting that their recommendation was to start the process over again. If we have these people there on the commission, let's listen to them.
Okay. Mr. Hale, you'd like 30 seconds?
Oh wait, just to clarify. The chief, the captain, 2 sergeants, and 2 line officers recently went to implicit bias training put together by the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Officials. There is an existing anonymous complaint system. It can be improved, and the police department is working with the Highland Park Equity Commission to improve that. And in terms of the recommendation of the police chief, the Highland Park Equity Commission very clearly and very directly said, this is a process that we think has problems. This is not something that we are necessarily in favor of. But of the officers that are in the pool, these are the 2 that we would like to choose. It's a disagreement about the language of that, but it's clearly not true that they did not say that these officers were the best.
Okay, Mr. Morial, would you like to?
Do I have
30 seconds on.
I have in this book, it'll take me a minute to find the date, but I have the exact quote from the town council meeting when the question was brought up about the recommendation the Equity Commission made, and it was clearly stated by the mayor that the Equity Commission did not in fact recommend those two individuals. They in fact recommended the process be started over. I can
Okay.
find the date in my, in here
And
later.
Mr. George, can you add to that or
No,
clarify? All right, thank you. We only got time for one more question, and it's sort of a follow-up question. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Hale. How would you address the needs of residents in town who are undocumented and afraid of ICE? Can you deal with that?
Sure. So again, and I've mentioned it repeatedly because I'm very proud of it, the Immigration and Refugee Committee wrote, along with the Highland Park Police Department, a standard operating procedure for the Highland Park Police Department when it comes to dealing with our Immigrant and Refugee Committee. It is in line with the Attorney General guidelines, and we do have to give the Attorney General some credit as well because it was a very important aspect of him. And essentially the argument says, and this SOP says, that our police department is not a federal law enforcement. We are not involved in the process of helping ICE round people up. We will follow the law, and we will only follow the law, but we are not going out of our way in any way, shape, or form to round up immigrants or refugee members because ICE asks us to. And I think that's a very, very strong statement by the police department that we are committed to being a fair and welcoming community, which is a resolution that was passed by the borough saying that we are a fair, welcoming community to immigrants and refugees all over the world. And as proof of fact, we have welcomed more refugees to Highland Park than just about any other borough, certainly in Middlesex County. That's what Highland Park is known for, and that's what we hope to continue.
Mr. Morial, how would you address the needs of residents in town who are undocumented?
I truly believe that the town does a very good job in this issue. I have no qualms, with anything that Mr. Hale stated. I think the town does a very good job. We are a city sanctuary town, and coupled with the efforts of the town and the efforts coming out of Interfaith Rise, Dyer, and the Reformed Church of Highland Park, I think that Highland Park is very strong in that area.
Mr. George, can you add?
I can't add too much to what Mr. Hale and Mr. Morial agree with, other than to say that the town, in all of its treatments, we adopted a municipal ID program, which does not retain documentation, which does not require identification of origin, but which we went door to door with the merchants and the towns and the apartments and said, we'd like you to start recognizing this as a form of identification. And in my work, quite honestly, where I deal with unlicensed and people who are undocumented, having that identification is a significant step in starting to, at least in our town, to allay some of those fears. In addition, everywhere that we can, we delete and eliminate any identification that requires national origin, and we administer our services without any reference whatsoever, other than residents first.
Thank you, gentlemen. And now it's time, it didn't go fast, it's time for the closing statements. So I'd like to go in reverse order, and each of the gentlemen will have 2 minutes, and we're going to start with Matt Hale.
So thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having this event. And thank you most of all to everyone who showed up tonight. This is a fantastic turnout, and I think it says a lot about the commitment that all of you have to a better Highland Park. As I said earlier, My wife and I live over on North 4th Avenue with my little guy David and our dog Lucy. I live 5 houses away from Miss Coleman. I don't by any stretch pretend that I know her particularly well. I have friends of mine who say that more than anything, she passionately cares about her children. And I hope that you've seen tonight how passionate we are about our children, how passionate we are about making Highland Park a better place for all of our children. I told you earlier that my daughter is 16. Tonight, she is at a sports banquet where she's going to get an award called the Brian Piccolo Award. Brian Piccolo was a running back. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the best, but he worked harder than anybody else. And he worked as hard as he possibly could for his team. At the end of the day, all I can hope is that someday I can be like my daughter. I work as hard as I possibly can. I might not be the sharpest, I might not get everything right all the time, but I can promise you that I will work to make sure that Highland Park is the best that it can be for all of our kids.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Austin Mayoral.
My wife and I also have 2 kids. One of our 7th grader is actually here. She gave up watching Netflix to come watch this. Thank you, Georgina. And to echo a little bit of what Mr. Hale just said, all I can tell you is I will work hard. I will listen. I will be responsive. I don't have years of political experience. I don't even have a day of town council experience. But I have experiences that people in this town can relate to, and I can relate to them. I would bring new communities to the board, fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. I would give voice to different communities that don't feel welcome because they're not seen in the current government. I would make sure that they're reached out to and they feel a part of this town. We pride ourselves on being a welcoming, diverse town. Let's make it really be true. Every act that the Borough Council considers needs to take into consideration every single resident, not just your neighbor that lives on the north side, not just my neighbor who lives on the south side, but everyone in this town matters. We're too small of a town to be such a small circle of government.
Thank you. And now the final speaker is Phil George.
In closing out the council portion of this meeting, I'd just like to thank the league. I'd like to thank mostly everyone who's here. I think you've seen and heard a lot of what goes into the nuts and bolts, as well as the thoughts and aspirations of this town. I use my wife and my kids as a sounding board, and they always ask, what about the people down the street? What about the people over there? What about the people on Woodbridge? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So as much as we've gone through some adversity, we have been delighted with the progress that we're building on. We've been delighted with the DPW workers that stop by the house, or the crazy artists that stop by all the time, the art collective, the arts commission, working with the Meadows Trail people. I was out last Saturday. I noticed the walkway between the car wash and the shul was overgrown, and people were walking on the way to services in the street. So I took my lawnmower out and I cut it. And I was talking to some of the gentlemen and ladies as they walked, and they said, thank you. You gotta think of everybody. I do, and I want your vote.
Thank you. And thank you, gentlemen. And now we can applaud them all. We're going to take a short 5-minute break. so we can set up for the next mayor. Then I'm briefly going to reiterate some of the rules. I think you probably know these two ladies better than I. On my immediate left is Gail Brill-Miller, and then to her left is Monique Coleman. And you're going to have to listen to them and then determine which of the two you want to be the Democratic mayoral candidate. I would reiterate that with the questioning, make sure that your questions address the issues that come before mayor, borough council, and that they are addressing issues, not personalities. And the candidates have just drawn for their opening speaking position, and they've chosen to come up to the podium. And they're going to speak from the podium for their opening remarks, which are 2 minutes. Then they're going to have 2 prepared questions. And with those prepared questions, they will have 2 minutes to respond. Thereafter, we will have questions from the audience, and they will be for 1.5 minutes. And we'll close with a 2-minute closing. Someone has suggested that they can't see the candidates, and unfortunately, I'm sorry for you in the back, but for the questioning, the candidates do have to sit here because we can't have up and downing. It really gets too bad. So I think then if we're ready to go, I would like to start, and so I'm going to ask the the first speaker is going to be Gail Brill-Miller, and she's going to speak for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Mayor Gail, and I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, but I want to give a special thank you to the folks who've reorganized the local chapter of the League of Women Voters. They have totally for them. Thank you. So why do I want to do this? My husband actually asks me that question every single day. Why do I want to do this? I want you to know that I get a stipend of something over $6,000, and I get to work 24/7 all week long. I'm on call or on duty or in meetings approximately 12 hours a day. I'm then at night. There are times I don't get home from council meetings till 11:30 at night. When I go to the supermarket, it's a 2-hour trip. And for those of you who want to be mayor someday, Monique, you may want to listen to this. Start at the produce and end at the ice cream business. I want to do this because I love my job. I love this community. About 20 years ago, some friends of mine and I from the PTO got together, and we said we wanted to have more of a woman's voice in local government here. So we ran, and we won. And those folks paved the way for me and future administrations and future mayors to be able to make this community one of the best communities in this country. And we've been working towards that goal. And I'm going to talk some more about that and what we've accomplished a little bit later. But let's get the show on the road.
I forgot to remind you that you're not going to applaud until the end. Okay, so are we in agreement now? All right, good. All right, now we're going to have a 2-minute opening from Monique Coleman. Ms. Coleman? No, we're not going to do that anymore, are we?
Good evening, evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to Mayor Gale, my candidate, co-candidate. Thank you all for coming out, and thank you to League of Women Voters for hosting this event and for giving the opportunity to come out and hear from all the candidates. I am Monique Coleman, and I live here with my husband Wayne and my 3 teenage sons. I was born and raised in Scotch Plains to a single mom of 2 girls, and I'm also the daughter of a former councilman in Rahway. I earned a BA degree in sociology from Spelman College in Atlanta, and I earned a master's degree in special education from Teachers College, Columbia University. Since 2006, I own my own small business, and in that capacity, I work with and coordinate with school districts across the state of New Jersey, implementing specialized education programs for students and adults with special needs. In that capacity, I have to balance fiscal, regulatory, and educational priorities among teams of diverse stakeholders. I am also very civically engaged. I have sat at the table with municipal, state, and also law enforcement officials to solve complex community problems. In Newark, I worked with the law enforcement there to initiate a brand new block association. I secured grant funding for a community beautification project. In Woodbridge, I galvanized the neighborhood to put together an unprecedented flood retreat program that has been featured in PBS NewsHour and the American Scientific. I am a doer and I'm an includer. Here in Highland Park, I served on the Board of Education for almost the past 2 years, and I'm also a trustee on 2 nonprofits. I am running for mayor of Highland Park because, like all of you, I love this borough. And if you elect me to be your mayor, I will make sure that Highland Park moves forward with an even more open, transparent, and inclusive government that represents more of its borough. We are the borough's best asset. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to now start with the questions that were prepared and given to you earlier. And I'm going to start with you, Ms. Coleman. What are the critical issues that you see facing the community now, and how would you prioritize them?
Thank you for the question. One thing that's clear to me after talking to many residents here in Highland Park over the past year, that a starting point to addressing our critical issues is ensuring that our government is more transparent, inclusive, and engaging of all of its residents. A top priority here in this borough is redevelopment of our Main Street. Through redeveloping our Main Street, through bringing in revenue-generating businesses, rateables, as we referred to earlier, will help us to alleviate the tax burden on many of the residents here in Highland Park. We also have to focus on our infrastructure and our roads. We want to make this town a safe walking town, a safe town for drivers as well, and we need to prioritize that by making sure that we have an administration that's strong and securing grant funding, continued grant funding, and also making sure that we are applying the kind of pressure on contractors through contracts to ensure that they are responsible for the work that they do in our roads and they're held accountable to that work. I would also say that in the area of public safety, which has been touched on earlier, we need to continue to enhance our police department through fair and equitable law enforcement and really make sure that we're committed to being a 21st century law enforcement here in Highland Park, a model of 24th century policing. I will also say that in terms of public safety, we also want to make sure that we're properly funding our fire department and making sure that they have the equipment they need, the specialized equipment, as well as good functioning facilities. I also want to say that a critical issue that has come up in many of my discussions here with neighbors is that we also want to make sure that we are strong and offering a variety of recreational programs that represent the diversity of this borough's needs, as Austin spoke to earlier, and we can do that through engaging more of our residents through the entire process of decision making. I don't intend, if elected to be mayor, to face these challenges alone. It is a community-wide inclusive movement that we are building in this campaign, and we will carry it through in my administration.
Ms. Brill-Miller, your critical issues.
So I think of the critical issues facing us in Highland Park as the 3 E's: the economy, the environment, and equity. So let's talk about the economy for a minute. Downtown development is the economic future of this municipality. We must continue to build upon the development we've started to see downtown and make our town a more vibrant and exciting area. Secondly, shared services. We have to use shared services to help us stabilize our taxes for our residents. We've enacted several shared services so far with other municipalities and also with the Board of Ed. Additionally, for economic growth here in Highland Park, we also have to find additional sources of revenue. And an example of that for you to think about is the PSE&G solar field that we have started at the end of South 7th Avenue. That is a piece of previously unusable land that we owned that we are now renting to PSE&G so they can do studies on solar energy that will benefit not only Highland Park, but the entire state of New Jersey. That's a good segue into the issue of the environment. So the solar field is one of them. We also got a grant to do a feasibility study for a microgrid. The microgrid would kick off, it's kind of like our own little grid, that would kick off when the municipality is not getting power from the overall grid. So you all remember Sandy and the times that we had then. This would then kick on and keep Highland Park functioning and powered. Lastly, I want to quickly talk about equity. I did start the Highland Park Exit program for children, and I also
You're gonna have to stop.
started the teen center, and we'll have to stop.
Yeah, you can do it later. But I'm going to ask you to start the next question,
Okay.
so keep in there. How would your election provide the leadership that you believe best serves the community?
Okay,
For 2 minutes.
so, or longer. Serving the community, I mean. Okay, so I've been involved in Highland Park for many, many years, not only as an elected official, but I also served in nonprofits throughout the community. I was one of the original members of the Educational Foundation here in Highland Park, serving as its chair of public information. I also served as a temple president at my synagogue and was in fact involved in some other nonprofits and organizations, grassroots here in Highland Park. I was elected to the council in 2019, and in 2009, it's been that long ago, and served as a town council president, and then became mayor in 2014. It takes a lot of knowledge of not only local government, but also working with our other elected officials, going down to Trenton, and lobbying for Highland Park. I have been doing that since 2009. I know what we've accomplished thus far, and I know I am the person that would be able to continue building on the progress that we've made.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman.
Yes, thank you for the question. Anywhere Austin and I have gone over the course of this campaign, we have been called the equity candidates. And yes, we are the equity candidates. Equity is important. It's about ensuring that all residents here have a chance and an opportunity for their voices to be heard, their experiences to be valued and responded to, and certainly to be able to thrive. But we're not just the equity candidates. We're also the responsive government candidates. We will look towards effectively addressing issues before they linger and fester by focusing on regularly collecting information from residents about their concerns. We're also the smart development candidates, and that means we are the ones who are going to ensure strong leadership and administrative powers to include residents' input as plans are being made so that the people will know what's going up, what's going down, and what's happening in their neighborhood. We're also the fiscal responsibility and sustainability candidates. We believe in ensuring that we pursue redevelopment plans that provide the best financial benefit for this borough and reflect our green priorities. We are the safety candidates, the ones who will recognize and act on the fact that every part of this town deserves safe, quality roadways for pedestrians, bikes, and cars. And we're the recreation candidates to help ensure that our library is properly funded, well-maintained, and we will seek creative ways to enhance the recreation we have here, so kids will have more than one set of basketball hoops to play around in, and may even have a water play around town. We are here to represent and reflect the values and priorities of this borough and bring new voices to the decision-making table. I can respect and honor people who have been serving in office for a very long time. Here in Highland Park, there have been the same set of voices functioning here in our government. It's time for new voices to represent this borough, who are even more inclusive, even more engaging, even more reflective of the diversity of this borough, and that's what I'm prepared to bring to the leadership table, and I'm ready from day one to do that.
Thank you. And now we're going, we're going to now move to the questions from the audience, and each of the candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer these questions. And so I'm going to start with you, Ms. Coleman. What is your vision for Highland Park 5 years from now?
So we do have a master plan, and first thank you for that question, wherever it came from. We do have a master plan here in Highland Park that does address that specific question. And as a matter of fact, we have a Vision 2020. And that plan includes ideas around redevelopment, some of which has already been touched on, looking at our downtown and how we can add vibrancy to Main Street by bringing in new businesses, mixed-use spaces, ground floor residential spacing, if that's the case. My plan is to ensure that we actually do facilitate these plans and see them realized. Why can't we be creative and innovative through opening up partnerships with Rutgers, with J&J, other private and public institutions right across the river, for possibly bringing satellite administrative office spaces here to Highland Park? I want to see us reconstitute the open public agency that we had to pursue our redevelopment plans, so that we open up the process of pursuing redevelopment in a way that this whole entire community will be able to be engaged, will know what's occurring, and will have input. That's what my plan is, to see us develop this borough in a way that's open and transparent and inclusive, and I want to see that happening starting with our Main Street and see it filter out to all the needs in this borough. By 2020, I want to also ensure that every person that enters this borough, whether they're just passing by or whether they're new residents, feel welcome and they are treated fairly and respectfully wherever they are in this borough.
And thank you, Ms. Brill-Mittler. What is your vision for Highland Park?
So we have the start of a perfect downtown. Economic development and redevelopment of our downtown must continue to be a major focus for us. I want to see every store filled downtown. I want to continue working with Main Street Highland Park to bring the right businesses into our downtown. And I want to see living spaces on top of these stores. I want spaces where people of all economic backgrounds can live together, walk downstairs, have a cup of coffee, sit on our corner benches, listen to music in the streets. I want to see an arts center in the middle of Highland Park, and that is something we're working towards. I want to see everyone in Highland Park stopping and eating in some of our ethnic restaurants. And I also envision the continued, what I call, shortening of the bridge between Highland Park and New Brunswick, and that includes the Rutgers campus. I want to see shuttle services going from Highland Park to the Rutgers communities. We have a large percentage of our population affiliated with Rutgers. We can't ignore them, and I want to get them out of their cars. I want to see them walking across the bridge or taking a shuttle and continuing to bring life and vibrancy to our downtown.
Okay, you'd like 30 seconds, Ms. Coleman?
Yes, if possible. I would just like to say say that I admire the vision and plans that I've just heard from Mayor here. These are the same ideas that I heard when I first moved here, and I've certainly looked at the plan, the master plan of this borough and the Vision 2020 for this borough, and we have a long way to go yet on that. I think it's time for us to start thinking about new ways to approach the goals that have been in place for many, many years that we still have yet to realize in our Main Street downtown. Do you want 30 seconds to? Yes.
Thank you, Monique. I do want to tell you that we recently went through some changes. I too get frustrated with how long it takes to get something done. We did just recently change the way we're doing redevelopment in Highland Park and have a new planner who is working with us, who rebuilt all of Metuchen. Not that I think we should get as big as Metuchen was striving to get, but he's now working with us to bring that vibrancy and people back into the downtown and bring us new businesses as well.
Okay, we're going to move on. And would you answer this, Ms. Brill-Mittler?
We'll get used to it after a while.
It's about cultural and language diversity. Please describe at least 2 ideas you believe would help people who speak various languages to be involved in government and working in the community.
That's a good question. And I want to thank whoever brought it forward. We do have a very diverse population here. We have some programs currently at our community center with Chinese-speaking language people who are teaching some of our new residents how to speak English as well. We have, right now, I would like to see more of our children involved with our seniors so that they can share, the seniors can share some of their experiences and what they went through as they came to Highland Park and help to make this community what it is back then, today. And to have them share with our children their history so our children can learn from them and help form their own opinions of where Highland Park should be. I think we also have the opportunity of bringing people into our committee structure, and that is something I would like to see us do more of. We right now have vacancies on some of our boards and commissions, and I don't want language to be a barrier for that, so if we can find a way to bring people together so that they can share their languages and backgrounds and get them more involved through our Immigrant and Refugee Task Force and other vehicles we have to get more involved in government here.
Thank you. Ms. Coleman, do you have any ideas, at least 2 ideas, on how you would believe people can be brought into the work of the community?
Yes, thank you. One of the ideas that works really well in our schools that I think can also extend at the municipal level is to initiate what's called conversation cafes, which allow our new immigrants or individuals who are still learning the English language to engage in conversations that encourage them to develop their English language skills. In the schools, that's parents partnered with children. In the communities, that can be adults partnered with younger or older adults, young and old, mixed age groups, and have those particular conversation cafes in different places in neighborhoods here in Highland Park. I want to see, as Austin Mayoral mentioned earlier, our boards and commissions being even more reflective and better utilized in tapping into the rich diversity we have here in Highland Park. During our campaigning, we traveled around to some of the apartment complexes on the outskirts of this town to people who, yes, many of them did not speak the English language fluently, but we did have interpreters with us to help speak to them. But many of them said they didn't even know anything about who their government officials are, who represents them, because no one knocks on their doors. So we need to start reaching out even more to people who really don't see the faces of their officials. And that's something that I would do, and I would make sure I have a team of people on our councils that truly do reach out and tap into those broader networks here in Highland Park. We can't depend on the same people to constantly continue to do the work of what we call diversity. I want to see that open up even more. Thank you.
Ms. Coleman, let's move on. And what policies do you have, or what policies should be on the environment to fight climate change?
So I will say, as a someone who's actually experienced the adverse effects of climate change myself personally in my former residence in Woodbridge. I was a flood victim and faced years of extreme flooding. And as I said earlier, literally had to galvanize the community to find a solution to a chronic problem. So I really do relate to what happens when real communities are impacted by this global issue of climate change. Here in Highland Park, this borough has been a leader in sustainability for decades, at least starting in the 1990s. And I think we continue to do quite well in using our sustainable Highland Park and our commission to continue to drive the issue of sustainability and green priorities that we establish here. And I would like to see that continue. I'm a fan and an advocate of the plastic bag and ordinance. As much of angst as that caused some people, it certainly is a step forward in that direction. And I would continue to see those kind of initiatives, certainly through our Sustainable Highland Park Commission, continuing to utilize it and do even more. The more that we learn and know about how to make our local communities sustainable, the more that we can actually do that here on a local level, implementing it right here, starting in our own tiny borough.
Ms. Britt Mettler, what should we do with policies to fight climate change?
So I am a member of the Climate Mayors, which is a group of mayors from across the country. We work together and share information to help us move forward with green energy. And by the way, folks, climate change is real. The plastic bag ban was step one in making our municipality even greener than it has been. But I want to talk for a second about that microgrid feasibility study I mentioned earlier. Highland Park is a donut community, which means we get our energy from two surrounding municipalities, Edison and New Brunswick. You all, I shouldn't say you all, but how many of you were here during Superstorm Sandy? Okay, so you remember what it was like when parts of our community were down for 14 days. And then we finally got our energy back, and the next thing we knew, the Edison power station caught fire, and half our town was down again. We can't let those things stop us as we move forward. We're not going to be experiencing less storms. We're going to be experiencing more storms. This microgrid will be a way for us to stay lit, get it, during power outages.
Okay, thank you. We're going to keep moving, and I'm going to ask you to start with this one as well. What is being done, and what would you do to deal with crime in the community, particularly break-ins into homes and cars and things like that? How can the public be kept in the loop on these issues?
Okay. So, as you may or may not know, and whoever gave us that question clearly knows, we have had a spate of burglaries. There were 24 home burglaries at the beginning of 2018. There were several car burglaries throughout town. Our new police department is well aware of the issues and the problems that we're experiencing with these burglaries. We have been working very closely with the county in solving these problems. We have a police department right now of 26 people. We do need to increase the number of police officers that we have here. I want the police officers out in the community more. We've talked about getting them out of their cars and actually walking around more frequently so they're more observant and so they're more accessible to people. And that is part of what would help us solve some of the burglaries that we've experienced recently, in the recent past. I also think it's important that we have better communications from our police department, and they have started a Facebook page that has been regularly notifying residents of things that are going on. We also have a Nixle messaging system, and by the way, if anyone is not signed up for Nixle, please let me know. We We need to get more and more people signed up for these emergency notifications.
Thank you. Ms. Coleman, how would you deal with crime in the community and notification to the public?
Right, I wanted to start with notification to the public, because as you know, I'm not serving currently, I'm not dealing with the situation of crime in the community, but I will say that this is my first time actually hearing that there is an ongoing problem with the home burglaries. I know that was a problem about a year or so ago, but this is my first time hearing that there still is a problem with that. I was not aware, so certainly enhancing communication to make sure more of our residents are aware of ongoing problems with burglaries would be a first very easy solution, and unfortunately not everyone is on Facebook, following all of the pages on Facebook. Not everyone necessarily has access to the web, so we really have to think about ways of getting information to more members of our community, and whether that's through having surrogates in the community who can start phone call chains, literally going back to using that text messaging, finding other ways to reach out to people that do not necessarily require the resources of having the internet or being tapped into Facebook. I will say too that for me, because of the dynamics we have in our borough with its diversity, the issues that we know that we have around equity and in many cases profiling, whether it's from community members or from law enforcement who are still working on recognizing implicit bias and solving it, and I'm glad that they're getting training for that. We have to keep in mind that those are areas that we need to be concerned about as we're heightening the presence of the law enforcement in our communities to keep our communities safe. Yes, we want to keep our communities safe. We want to make sure that every member of the community who belongs where they belong is seen as a resident. So not assuming that someone who may not look like they belong there is actually not a resident. And I think that's key for our law enforcement, and I think that will move us forward and make this community more unified and work together in our supporting our police to addressing our challenges.
Thank you. Ms., you want 30 seconds.
Yeah, I don't think I'll even need all of 30 seconds, but I want to thank you for reminding me of something. I did mention Facebook before, and I do agree with Monique that not everybody has access to Facebook. So what we started doing, you may notice there are some kiosks that have been placed in key areas around town, and we take the Facebook notifications we send out and make copies of them and put them up in the kiosks so that people can actually see them as they're walking around town. We also put them in key locations throughout town and at the community center.
Okay. We'll continue then, and I'm going to ask you, Ms. Coleman.
How would you address the segregation, fear-mongering, and isolation that appears to be pervasive in our community?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first word. Did you say segregation?
Segregation, fear-mongering, and isolation that appears pervasive in our community?
That's one person's opinion. Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. Those are strong terms: segregation, fear-mongering, and isolation. I would agree that in this borough, as tiny as it is, it's tremendously diverse, and we have these pockets, sort of micro-communities here. I've certainly learned that over the past year of going out to community meetings and meeting more people over the course of this campaign, traveling to the different parts of this borough. And I do see neighborhoods that are neighborhoods in and of themselves in this borough. And I think that question could be speaking to the fact that there are people in this borough who may feel a little bit more isolated from the main kind of center of this town. So that means we do need to have more outreach and engagement, whether it's through our commissions and boards, actually having their meetings in different parts of the borough to engage more people, then let's do that. It doesn't matter that our town is only less than 2 square miles large. We still have people who don't feel connected. So the way to do that is to reach them, find them where they are, not expect them to always come to a council meeting or a forum or a public hearing. The other point was about segregation, and yes, we do have a long-standing history of segregated housing here in Highland Park. Let's call it what it is. I've noticed that clearly, and I think everyone in this room clearly knows that. And there are people who feel like they're not even a part of this community. That's something that we have to take seriously and address. When we talk about equity, we talk about equity in all areas, meaning equity in housing, and making sure that people who live here, no matter where they live, feel like they're still integrated in this community, and their needs and voices are heard and they're engaged. And that takes effort. That takes effort on the part of the officials. It takes an interest in the part of the officials to actually do that and make it happen.
Ms. Brill-Midland, your thoughts?
So Highland Park has always been a community with different opinions and different values. and different points of view. But we have always in the past been able to come together to talk about things and work things out as a community, almost like a family. Families argue amongst themselves too. What's been happening in this country, we cannot allow it to seep into who we are as Highland Park. We must always remember that even though we may be different from one another, we share a common goal and a common vision for the future of our community. So it's disturbing to hear that question, you know, the fear-mongering. This is something that is part of the world that we're living in today. We must stand strong as Highland Park the way we have traditionally done. Yes, there are segments of segregation. There are segregated communities in Highland Park. That has to end. I agree completely with that. And we are working to doing that as we build more housing throughout the community. So remember, Highland Park, we must be able to talk to one another civilly and work out our problems together.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, Ms. Brill-Mittler, this is somewhat of a follow-up, I believe. What are your plans to ensure that housing in Buck Woods as well as elsewhere provides adequate numbers of affordable housing units? How can the developer be encouraged or required to provide more than a minimum number of affordable housing units?
So this administration has been working very hard to ensure that every new development in Highland Park has affordable housing units within them. Not only have we instructed every developer, including the one in Buck Woods, to set aside a percentage of their housing for affordable housing, we have also, as was stated earlier when the council people were sitting here, we have also developed our own plan for working with organizations like the Reformed Church of Highland Park's affordable housing arm. I was just today at a ribbon cutting for a new housing, two-family house that is providing two three-bedroom apartments to families who could otherwise not be able to afford to live in Highland Park or live in a house as beautiful as this one was made. We have projects that are going on. We are working very diligently with nonprofits like the RCHP Housing Authority to ensure that we have affordable housing throughout the community, not just spot housing in segregated areas.
Ms. Coleman, your thoughts on Buck Woods and affordable housing?
Right, so the situation in Buck Woods is long-standing and very complex. And I will say that the affordable housing that's being placed there isn't necessarily an initiative that the borough took upon themselves out of an interest in affordable housing. It was actually court-ordered in terms of being required to fulfill a long-standing obligation that we as a borough had fell behind in. So that's why the amount of affordable housing that's going there in Buck Woods is what it is. And we, as all boroughs and municipalities in New Jersey, do have the requirement to ensure that we're providing enough affordable housing in all of our buildings and apartments, new construction, old construction. We have to make sure that we do set aside affordable housing. But I can tell you that for me, and this is so important, speaking to so many residents around here, what is the plan for affordable housing? This is my first time hearing that we have plans in the works. We need to really make sure that all of us as residents really know what the plans are. Right now, there's a screening committee that I know works on our redevelopment, and that screening committee has their meetings in private, and they are a small body of certain experts and professionals, and certainly representative of our municipal government here. But we used to have a redevelopment agency, and that was a public body that had public meetings like all of our commissions. And through those public meetings, the public could actually know what plans are being made on behalf of the borough. We don't have that anymore. So when I hear that there are plans going on for either new apartments or new housing that will address our affordable housing needs, I have to wonder really what those plans mean. I think many of us think the same. Where is that building going to go? How is it going to impact the community? We're all for redevelopment and development and affordable housing, but we need to also make sure that the community is fully aware of those plans, not after they're already almost finalized.
Thank you. 30 seconds.
Okay, so I have two things I'd like to add to the discussion. First of all, the affordable housing situation we're in started in 2008. Our administration is very close to solving and ending the litigation that has been going on since 2008 for affordable housing here, and to the tune of legal fees of over $528,000. We're putting an end to that. Additionally, the screening committee, I just want to correct one thing. These are not private meetings, they are open public meetings, and so are the redevelopment arms of the council, and we do have those meetings as well. They are noticed.
30 seconds. Ms. Coleman, can you add to that?
Yeah, I would just like to know if that screening committee is actually a public body. Where are their meeting notes? Where are their agenda posted when they have their meetings? Where do they meet? I looked on the website, I don't see that. Who are the members of this committee? I don't see that either. It's not regulated by the state. It's a screening committee. It's not a public body.
Okay, thank you. Then why don't we, for the last question, go to transparency? And I think we should do that. And I'm going to ask you to start, Ms. Coleman. How would you improve on transparency in the town when it comes to important issues that affect the community?
Right, so as we were already talking, the first thing I made clear that I would propose and I would certainly want to do is to ensure that something as fundamentally crucial in this borough as redevelopment is done in as open and as a transparent way as possible. Yes, that may take a little longer to get things done. Yes, that may mean that there will be discussions that have to happen in the public where there may be disagreements about things. And yes, that may mean that public officials have to actually take more notes, file required reportings to the state. But at the end of the day, the process will be more accountable to this whole community. It'll be open so residents know what's going up, what's going down, what's being put up in their neighborhood or on Main Street. And I would start from day one with saying, let's go back to the table here and talk about reconstituting our redevelopment agency, even if it's for a short period, while we're in such a crucial stage of redeveloping our Main Street and also going through development at Buckwoods and on Cleveland Avenue. Let's make this process open. Let's make sure our government officials are including experts that we have here in the borough, in addition to our planner, in addition to our planning committee, in the process of doing this, but let it be done in the open, and currently it is not. I would also like to say that our government meetings that discuss public discussion, meeting items need to happen in the public, not in private meeting rooms. That has to also be more engaging of our community. I know for a fact that me, and I'm a very savvy person on the internet, I didn't know that we had 6 o'clock agenda meetings in a conference bowl fish room. I found out because I was told about a 7 o'clock meeting and a project that was going to be presented, but I wasn't told about the 6 o'clock. I heard afterwards that the presentation was made during the 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock meeting that I knew nothing about.
Ms. Coleman, stop. Thank you. Now, Ms. Brill-Mittler, your thoughts on that transparency?
Yeah, transparency, not redevelopment.
How would
That was
you
the
improve
question.
on the transparency in the town when it comes to important issues that affect the community?
Okay, so as far as transparency goes, if I'm trying to hide things from the public, I must be doing a really bad job. Because as far as transparency goes, I was the mayor that started the Public Information Committee. I was the one that started the Facebook pages. I was the one that started the Nixle messaging. There are many different forms of public information that did not exist before our administration came in. So we've got the Facebook page, we've got the flyers all over town, we've got Nixle messaging, we have HPTV, hi Gary, we've got many different forms of communication, not only electronic, but also through flyers and open public meeting notes.
Okay, thank you. 30 seconds, Ms. Coleman.
I just want to say that communication is definitely different from transparency, and I think we have a long way to go to improving transparency here in this borough. Yes, they are closely linked, but yes, they are different. When we're being fully transparent, we will not have residents who don't know that development is happening right next to them until they hear chainsaws or trees coming down. When we talk about transparency, we need to make sure that people really know what's happening before, well in advance of it happening. And we have a lot of work to do in that area here in Highland Park. I will say too that transparency also means making sure that beyond a Facebook page or beyond a notice and flyers being put out, we need to think about using our human resources here to reach more people in this borough with the information that they need to know.
Thank you. Do you need 30 seconds? No.
Yeah, I would just like to say that what I didn't include in my listing of transparency were the many open public meetings we have had. Issues on Buckwoods and open public meetings for Buckwoods in particular were held since the last 5 years. Notification of those meetings were sent to anyone living within the 200 feet of the area of Buckwoods, and that's South 5th and South 7th Avenues, as well as notification in our regular forms of Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those meetings have been held publicly for the last 5 years.
Thank you. I know it's hard. Okay, we come to the end of the question period, and I do thank you. There's still more questions, and you may have to talk to them privately afterwards. Okay, so we're going to have to move to the closing statements from each of the candidates, and we're going to go in reverse order. They have each 2 minutes. We're going to start with Ms. Monique Coleman.
For the first time in a long time, Highland Park voters have a choice to make about who will be their next mayor. I am running for mayor as a candidate who has led in the private sector as a business owner, in the public domain as a member of the Board of Education, and in the nonprofit sector, where I work with community organizations implementing grant-funded projects for individuals with diverse needs. I bring leadership skills and capacities in multiple areas, with working with multiple and diverse teams of stakeholders to the table here in Highland Park. People have heard me talk a lot about transparency, a lot about inclusion. These are not buzzwords to get me through an election cycle. This is about values that we need to make the bedrock of our government here in Highland Park. Inclusion means our government is actually making sure no residents' voices are being left out of important decisions that can substantially impact their lives. Transparency means that public discussions happen in the public, not in private meetings. On June 4th, Highland Park voters will have a choice to make, and it's not about left or right, it's about top down versus bottom up. Here in Highland Park, our administration tells us to trust us to make the decisions that's in our best interest. If I am mayor, I'm going to say I trust you, the Highland Park people, to help us make decisions that are affecting us and are really challenging this community. As mayor, I will promote a local government that says we want all our residents' voices to be represented and empowered and engaged in many areas of our needs, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's fiscal management, whether it's redevelopment. All voices here need to be empowered and engaged. I want to also say, on June 4th, vote line D as a Democrat for me, myself, Monique Coleman, and for Austin Mayoral for council. Thank you, candidate.
Thank you.
And thank you, Legal Women Voters. And thank you all for being here today.
And the next speaker is Gail Brill-Mitler.
Where is that noise coming from?
I'm not sure. The doors.
Thank you.
Whoever did it, thank you. Okay, we're going forward.
Okay. Highland Park has been very good to me and my family. I raised my children here. My children went to the Highland Park Public Schools. In fact, my son is running a business here in Highland Park. And he's now raising his son, my grandson. And now, more than ever, making Highland Park the type of community that we are all proud of for ourselves, for our children, and for our children's children is even more important to me than ever. That means we have to be concerned about the economy here. We have to be concerned about tax stabilization and downtown development. We have to be concerned about the environment, solar energy, other forms of green energy, finding ways to get people out of their cars and walking more and more. We have to be concerned about equity issues, and that means taking care of our children. Nearly 38% of our school children are on free or reduced lunch. When schools are closed, they may not be getting a nutritious lunch. We have to be concerned about them. We have to be concerned about our teenagers and what's happening with them in school, after school hours. We have to be concerned about our seniors and how we're going to care for them going forward. And those are just some of the reasons why I want to continue being your mayor. I am asking you to allow me and my team to continue to build on the progress we've begun. Vote for us, line B, on June 4th. Thank you.